I just want to say, oh my gosh, it's really thrilling to see all of you who are here today. I really, really welcome you, and just very moved to see people from all parts of my life and all times of my life. So welcome. Thank you.
It is exciting indeed. I'm recognizing some names coming in on the names that I learned about from the watch. So we invite the watch onto the screen here as really the central purpose of our gathering together here today. I got to meet the watch when it was just a manuscript several years ago, when a dear friend introduced me to Paula, and really immediately I dug into this extraordinary manuscript. I shared with her recently that I had a huge pile of manuscripts coming my way, and none of them spoke to me the way the watch did, that I knew immediately this was a very special book. And so it's exciting to see it coming out into the world in ways that this book has been affecting my life over the years that I've been working with Paula, getting it ready for this ready for prime time, ready to be out and about. I really want to dig into this with you, Paula, to try to even learn myself how it is that the watch came to be. Time to Witness the Beauty of It All is the subtitle. We can explore what this time is and how we can witness more deeply through our understanding of beauty. This idea of time being part of this larger view of life, this deeper view of life that comes through this book. And I'll share just personally how the first time I picked up the manuscript, like I said, I was drawn to it, but I initially thought that this book contained something that I didn't have, that I wanted what was in here. I was drawn to it with a craving for this type of ability to be present, or as Paula says, be present enough. And I felt I didn't have that. Over the time of working with you, Paula, and digging into this book, I discovered that I actually did have it all along, that we all have this capacity within ourselves to be more fully present. And the watch helped me realize that I had it all along, that it wasn't something I was missing in my life. I was curious, I was comforted, and I was challenged by this manuscript. And I knew that it needed a very special home. We needed a publisher that was going to allow it to become the book it needed to be. So that's sort of my preamble of my experience. But right here and now with you all, I'd like to ask some questions of you, Paula, that in all of our many conversations and our developing friendship over the years, I still don't fully know how you did it, how you were able to bring this book forward. So maybe we'll just begin with a simple question, and that is, why is this book called The Watch? How did that title was there before I met it. Tell me about that. Tell me about The Watch.
Yeah, sure. For me, that title was there. It was like a name, a phenomenon, something that was just it just didn't go away from even before my father died. And I guess to just get to the heart of the matter, about 3 months before my father died, I was staying with him at his home while my mom was away, and we were sitting outside, and somehow it just arose to this idea that we would trade watches. And so we did. And I remember had this kind of very ritual-like feeling of that I felt anyway, that something was happening. We were in something, and the exchange was just like this, like we were making some kind of unspoken pact. And as I often look back and think, really, I had no idea. I had no idea, but I felt like I was agreeing to something. And so then when my father died 3 months later, it was kind of like the really that last interaction, I'd say with him, but really with his body, to take my watch off his wrist and put it back on mine. So that had a kind of a very heightened sort of time out of time quality. But the watch wasn't done yet. So about a week later, after I got home, I one day went to put it on, and I was looking at it like, what's going on? And then I realized the six was gone. And then over the next couple of days, like another number would fall off, and then there went a hand, and the whole thing was just very gripping. And and then one morning I realized that during the night, somehow the six had got stuck and the watch had stopped, because it had kept going even while it was disassembling, but then it stopped. And something about this stopping of time, really, just in that moment, I remember being dropped into a sense of, but time continues. It stopped, but it continues, and dropped into the sense of the stream of time. And I began to just there was so much correlation between some of this watch stopping, my father's life ending, and 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 that somehow this feeling simultaneously that something continues. And so that was really the beginning of the watch prompting questions that for me that had to do with what happens to our relationship? Does it continue in some way? What is what is life, death, and time? So kind of really big questions, but then it yeah, not immediately. I was writing in my journal, but not thinking of this as something I was going to write. But but definitely just living with these sort of big questions.
That is exactly what drew me in, Paula. As an editor, I'm very interested in books that ask questions that are relevant to everyone. I recognize this book as a beautiful and poignant memoir. And I also recognize that there was more. If you pull on the thread of memoir, we get an adventure and a teaching in contemplative practice. We get teaching in vulnerability, in truth, this concept of time, so many complex opportunities is what I felt as I pulled on little threads with you throughout this beautiful story that had so many vivid and clear descriptions that it's almost like it's almost like watching a movie. It's so vivid, your memory. And that's another thing that struck me that made me realize that this book wanted to be written. It wanted to become a book, not be a manuscript. It wanted to be out there in a form that that people can receive. So I'm still asking the question about how did your memory inform you as you wrote?
Mhm. Yeah, my memory. Yeah. So it was about 2 years after my father died before I um I I might say it occurred to me to write, but actually it was it was this I would just wake up every morning for about a week, and there would be this sentence in my head, 1 week after my father died, the hands and numbers began falling off my watch. It was like this fully formed sentence. It was there every morning, and it was started to drive me crazy. So I felt like, okay, I will write it down. And I wrote it down. And that just felt like, okay, something, this is calling me to not, I had the feeling like, okay, something's calling me to not forget what happened. So I love that you say memory, and how forgetting and memory for me feel very close. And um yeah, so I, the first thing that I had, like all I really had to begin were just my journal notes. And so that was the very first thing, transcribing about a year and a half of just, sometimes I felt like quite random. Sometimes they were very much about experiences I was having in relation to my father, in relation to the feelings that were coming up. And there was also just a lot about what else was going on in my life. So that was the beginning of starting to see that things were, that there was a kind of weaving happening, that when I lived that experience, there were different parts of my life that were weaving together. And in looking at it from this kind of overview of seeing the chronology all spread out, I began to see like those different other parts that were going on in my life, my teaching, my founding of co-founding of a nonprofit, Mariposa, focused on early childhood education, like that somehow they all belonged. And that was really amazing to realize, like everything going on in my life was, even things that felt very diametrically opposites, were important, were part of the whole. So, and the other thing about having that chronology, speaking of memory, is that then not only could I start to see the themes, but I could see places that I was like drawn to want to, like, not just remember, but know more about. And I feel like that was a place my contemplative practices help my practice, what I've learned from Janet as in this practice where there's a mover and a witness, and something about the relationship. The relationship between the two are so important. It creates a space that something can emerge. So I sometimes felt that way in relation to this manuscript, was that I never quite knew, was I the mover or was I the witness? And but where a kind of space would be there in terms of my attention and my listening and my just following the threads of memory, that something it would emerge. So there are places in the watch where I feel I started to become aware of a kind of dropping below the narrative. And that is very familiar to me in my practice from Janet, of being in an experience. And on one hand, you could just sort of track it along, like, oh, this happened, then this happened, then this happened. But from another perspective, you could choose to drop into one place. Maybe it's like one little encounter, one gesture, and then it's like that was always a very exciting place for me, when like memory became alive through, and then of course here's this relationship to language, to as the writing process, that a kind of I would feel almost like an enlivening of the words that wanted to be written in relation to that experience that felt a little more under the surface.
Paula, as your editor, I sure witnessed that. And I was, in so many ways, the perfect first student for this book, because I don't have a background in the discipline of Authentic Movement. You introduced me to Janet Adler and this work. I was very intrigued because my daughter is a ballet dancer, and I don't know how I gave birth to a ballet dancer because I can't even, do the electric slide or whatever they do at weddings. I just, I don't have any of that. But I did understand that movement can be a portal, and you brought me in to that discipline, or I say you brought me in, but it was really the watch. This book that wanted to be written, which is very much your story, very much an intimate story of your deep relationships, is universal. It was never a closed door to all of our experiences. So although you're vulnerable in your sharing of your family's walk through, very difficult moments, you invite us in a way that we all understand. None of us gets through this life without loss, without that moment where the phone rings and your life changes. None of us gets through that, but the watch becomes a companion in a way that I think as an editor, you're a dream author to work with, because you were not wrestling with me. You were wrestling, or as your editor, you were wrestling with opening this portal. And I watched it open, and I watched the words tumble onto the page. And then, of course, lots and lots and lots of work to make them flow and contain the message you want them to contain. Personally, I read during the time that I was caring for my father toward his end of life. I didn't realize that's where I was. Same as you don't know where you are. But I shared with you at the time, Paula, and I'll share with all who are gathered here, that I was able to be far more present with my father than I would have without the watch. And that's when I knew we needed to get this book to more people, not just in an end of life setting. It's in everywhere I turn in my life. But one thing in particular, I remember, really having a hard time when my dad was admitted to a facility because he needed to be on an intravenous antibiotic for 6 weeks. And that place was hard to go to. And I remember talking with you about that, and you described the threshold of entering into a holy space, that even though this place smelled like Clorox bleach and it was kind of a depressing place, anytime I entered in, I recognized that I was crossing a threshold into a sacred place. And just that little bit of awareness allowed me, instead of shutting my heart and thinking, oh gosh, they didn't do this, or I didn't do this, or somebody, I was able to just look at my dad in his eyes and let him know that he's important to me. That's it. So simple. And that was years ago. And then, we were looking for the right publisher, and Wildhouse Publications did not exist yet. Wildhouse Publishing hadn't been born yet. So we shopped around, we tried some places, and it wasn't until I got involved with this place that talks about adventurous spirituality for unconventional people that I thought, this is the place for the watch. And indeed, I think this is the perfect place for the watch. And this is the perfect moment for this book to be released into the world, where people need the space that you provide. I entered into it. I can be the first to say, and others on this call who were able to read the early manuscript and recognize that this is indeed memoir, and it is universal human story. It doesn't dictate any doctrine or dogma. It's just experience. And what I found, and what I'm still learning, is that your practice, the discipline of authentic movement, Janet Adler's wisdom coming through that, and having worked with Bonnie Morrissey on her collected works, sharing that book in intimacy and emptiness, there is a profound gift in this practice and in this book. And we're lucky to have Bonnie Morrissey with us, your co-author on intimacy and emptiness, and also a deep practitioner of the discipline of authentic movement. So I'm very excited to expand the conversation more deeply into how this practice has allowed this book to emerge. Bonnie, I've gotten to know through Paula a little bit, and we have both had the great pleasure of digging into this book. But Bonnie comes to it as a licensed clinical psychologist who practices in Burlington, Vermont, has her private practice. She's a faculty member of Circles of Four, which is an international postgraduate program for people who want to learn how to teach the discipline of authentic movement. And she is a poet, and she has published books of poems, essays, like I said, co-authored with Paula. So it's such a great honor to sit with you both, who are such close students of Janet Adler and the discipline of authentic movement, which is yet another gift being given to us here through the watch. So I'll step back and invite you, Bonnie, to engage in the same kind of inquiry that we're having with Paula.
Thank you so much, Kate. I hope everyone can, I know everybody can get a sense for the special kind of editor that Kate has been such a gift to work together. So thank you so much. And Bonnie, hi.
Yeah. Hi, Paula. Thank you, Kate, for the introduction. Thank you, Paula, for having me with you. It's a total privilege. So, yeah, the watch is such a generous and generative gift to the world on so many levels. The story you tell about love and loss in a family is, I think, a human story that we don't tire of. And your iteration of this story is both poetic and just very beautifully written on every level. So that's my feeling about the watch. I was so drawn in by the gorgeous and wise way that you write about time and how our inner lived experience of time is not linear, typically, how time can expand or contract or sometimes even seem to stop. And also the unique and accessible way you write about your practice, sharing so directly the detail of how you come into relationship with the inevitability of time passing and your father dying and finding ways to grow and ways to accept and ways to become more whole and more fully present, really, through this difficult passage. So I feel so deeply appreciative of your writing. And the two of us share this embodied awareness practice. We've studied and taught together for decades now. We recently co-edited, as Kate mentioned, a book of writings by our teacher, Janet Adler. So my interest here, I'd love to ask you to share a bit more having to do with this practice and how it supports our capacity to be more fully present in our lives. So, so let me start with there's a passage early in the book that I strongly identify with, and that I imagine many of us strongly resonate with, where you describe your raw relationship to time. And I'd like to read this passage, which I think describes something common and essential about our relationship to time. And then I'd like to ask us to pause for a moment after I read it to take it in. So here's the passage. It's from page 4. There is something so primal about how we inhabit sequential time. I can barely have a thought without some reference to now, then, soon, when, before, after, tomorrow, yesterday, someday, next, or never. Language is our compass as we navigate the continuum of time. Yet, for much of my life, awareness of time has provoked an undertow of anxiety within me, a fear of not knowing what is coming next, mixed with the fear of not knowing when it will all end. I know a day will come when time will go on without me.
Mm.
Paula,
Yeah.
thank you for your description of this, the relationship between time and fear. So I'd like to ask you to respond to this passage if you wish, and then if you will, to read the subsequent passage.
Yeah, sure, Bonnie. Well, as a younger person, time could be quite challenging for me. I tended to be late. I felt a lot of pressures around deadlines and sometimes anxious in relation to the future and what would happen next, as Bonnie read. Meanwhile, my father always seemed to have just this incredible ease and expansive relationship with time. Somehow it's not surprising that time would be this central theme that would be present in this what I feel like is an afterlife conversation with him. So working with Janet was a huge support in my developing a more spacious sense of time. And still, while writing the watch, I was aware that my internalized patterns relating to time can still get in the way of my being present. So in the text that you're referring to, Bonnie, I describe, let me find it. I describe, sorry. Yeah. So I describe how accepting the reality of not knowing can be an antidote to such time issues. That not knowing can actually take the stress, at least for me, off this just the edginess of it. When I close my eyes and the visible world disappears, I am closing my eyes to the illusion that I know exactly where I am and where I'm going. When we close our eyes in the presence of a witness, perhaps a trusted other, or nature, or even a poem that deeply touches us, our not knowing may open us to an inner experience unfolding.
Beautiful. Ah, yes, the illusion that I know exactly where I am and where I am going. Thank you. Um, this practice of staying present right on the edge of not knowing, with questions of what am I experiencing in my body? Is there a longing, an impulse to move? And if so, how? What can I know right now? I feel grateful for this invitation. I love it that our practice offers a way through listening deeply within our bodies to step closer to that mystery right on the edge of the unknown and to strengthen our ability to stay more present in this moment, regardless of what's occurring. I feel like I need this practice in today's fraught world. Paula, you bring this practice of inner listening to life in the watch, inviting us to listen in on your inner dialogue right alongside you. There's another passage where you invite us to listen in on your inner dialogue. And I wonder if you could read from this passage. I think it's page 15 in the introduction.
Sure. Yeah. So someone is born, someone dies. Here lies the ineffable. As soon as I write these two words, birth, death, I am at the threshold of the unknown. What is here? What can I know in the vastness of so much mystery? My hands turn over. My arms slowly open to either side. I can know this gesture. My fingers are tingling. My palms are empty. I can know these sensations. My heart is full, emotions tumbling, changing. I can know these feelings of fear, awe, dread, confusion, joy, numbness, grief. When so very much is unknown, my body is a doorway into knowing something that is present and true in this moment.
Wow. So here is a whole complexity of what arises in response to our inner experience. You begin with a gesture, your hands turning over, and discover a world of sensation and emotion, such richness. And this is just a beginning. Paula, I love the potential that unfolds here. The doorway of your body opens you to so much. And yet, listening to you, I can feel both my curiosity and also my own edge of resistance. I can feel both my desire to explore joy and awe and my resistance to touching dread or grief. How much do I really want to know my inner experience? And how can I even begin to sort through all of this? And even if I gather my courage and learn to navigate my inner experience a bit, how do I bring this forward when I open my eyes and try to relate to another person? How do I know what's mine and what is theirs? What is projection and what might be more clear seeing? How can I bring my practice to moments when I'm feeling criticized or judged or critical and judgmental of others? I want to develop this quality of presence, but how do I deal with the hard parts?
Mm. Well, first of all, you just completely encapsulated the whole of the discipline of authentic movement, right? And these are such potent questions, right at this edgy place where curiosity meets resistance. So this is where we need compassion for ourselves, a kind
Mhm.
of humility in relation to what it means to really turn inwards, and which I think is also such a longing. Kate mentioned this craving. I think we have a longing to know ourselves more deeply, to be in relationship to these deeper, more dimensional parts of ourselves. So this becomes part of our practice, cultivating our capacity for patience and compassion, beginning with ourselves, because otherwise we'll just want to tune out, turn away from our inner experience because it can feel too painful. And this is why having an outer witness whose intention is to offer a non-judgmental space and compassionate presence can be so supportive. I'm remembering after my father died, I found a note. My mother and I actually found a note that he had written to himself. It was in a drawer, and he had written it at the outset of his diagnosis. And in this letter to self, I hear the voice of his inner witness offering loving guidance at such a formidable time. So I want to read that. Yeah, so Bob, his name was Bob. Bob, you can do this. Be generous, humorous, deeply supportive of all these fine people. Be unself-conscious and take good care of your body. Take all the help you can get. And then on the lower right side of this small piece of paper, in all caps, he wrote, okay, okay. It touches me to hear my father speaking first to his own fear and vulnerability, and then I'm so curious about this emphatic, okay, okay. It seems to have a completely different tone, slightly impatient, maybe even judgy. And I'm pretty sure we all know that more reactive voice in our head. For me, this speaks to the complexity and contradictions of the parts of ourselves and the dialogic nature of our mind. With practice, though, we can learn to be more conscious and compassionate toward these different aspects of self. Over time, the inner critic or commentator can become softer, quieter. As we open to and touch the more vulnerable parts of ourselves, we may come to experience vulnerability itself as a strength. I find myself wondering, is it actually when we consciously embody our own vulnerability that compassion can flow through?
Oh, Paula, thank you for reminding us about vulnerability and compassion. Yeah, compassion as a lifelong practice for sure. And thank you for bringing your mom into the picture. I think she's here today. I saw her, and so welcome, Marilyn. Um, your dad was not just insightful, but also a very compassionate man, from what I understand. And he knew something about working with resistance and reactivity. The cultivation of compassion is at the heart of our practice, for sure. And also, it seems to me, right at the heart of the watch. So, thank you again, Paula. As we come to the end of our conversation here, and open to questions and comments from other people, I'd like to mention one more way that you invite the reader into witnessing their own experience. In the short contemplative verses at the end of each chapter, you're inviting such witnessing of the reader by the reader. And I wonder how this came about that you decided to do this, and also wonder if you might read one of these short verses for us.
If we have time, do we have time, Ava?
I would say if you wanted to just share one really quickly, and then we could move on into the Q&A portion.
Okay, great. So,
Mm.
yeah, so what I want to immediately feel moved to share is part of why I put these little what I called contemplative pauses at the end of each chapter was because so many of the themes of the watch are universal, and I wanted to make room for whatever might arise within a reader relating to their own story and their own experience of life, death, family, and the mystery of it all. So this one, I actually want to offer as an expression of gratitude for each one of you here today or watching at a future time. Touch the page, your hands, your cheek. Touch the boundary of your own simple, separate self. No other like you ever seen in the universe.
Thank you, Paula, for our conversation, for your offering of the book.
Thank you,
Through
Bonnie.
reading it, yeah, I come closer to my own relationship with time and understand more about grief and acceptance. So it's such a beautiful invitation, and I hope it finds its way into each one of your hands and through your hands into the world. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Bonnie.
yeah.
Well, I'd like to open up these questions to the rest of the group. So these questions could be directed towards Paula, Bonnie, or Kate. And let me go ahead and open up the chat for everyone now. So if you'd like to ask a question, please feel free to type it into the chat or go ahead and do the raise hand function, which you can do by going to the bottom of your screen on the toolbars and clicking the react, raising your hand, and it'll push you to the front of the group. So any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat and we could read them aloud, or go ahead and raise your hand.
And it could be that maybe you just, especially having not read the book, it could be just you have a comment or a reflection.
Okay, so we have one from Jessica. Could you tell us where/how the book will be available? Will it be available on Baker and Taylor or Amazon? Well, I can actually answer this question. So the book is going to be available through our website, wildhousepublishing.com, and you can pre-order through Amazon at the moment. I think that's the link that is up and running today. But if you want to order through an alternative, we recommend using IndieBound. I think that we are still waiting for the pre-order link to be available there. However, Amazon is the place where you can pre-order it at the moment. And then on February 20th, the book will become available to order directly through the Wildhouse Publishing website. And I've included the link to that in the chat for everyone to access. We have another question from Susan Powers, who asked, Paula, what did you do with the broken watch?
Hi, Susan. Thank you for this question. Oh my goodness. I feel a little sheepish about answering this question because for a long time, I just kept the watch in a drawer in my sort of office writing space room. And every now and then would look at it and anyway, just actually my life got kind of busy a little bit before COVID and then through COVID, and I had completely set the watch aside and until I don't know, maybe it was it was a little over a year ago that Kate reached out and said, hey, I think I have an opportunity to bring the watch forward to a publisher. And so I remember after that exchange with her, I went to the drawer and it wasn't there. And I actually have not been able to find it.
Oh my God.
Since. And I remember telling this to you, Kate, and you saying, oh, it's playing hide and seek with you. So it's a mysterious object. So who knows when it will next make its appearance, or maybe it's just like it's done its job. Now there's a book and its name has been conferred to the book. So that's all I can say.
I love that question was asked, Paula, because the way you responded to it was both deep and surrendered. Mm. And that's what I'm learning from the watch is to go deep and then let go. And you did that for us in that answer.
I'm going to invite Jermaine to ask a question now. Thanks for raising your hand. I'm going to put you on Spotlight as well, so you can join the group and ask.
Thank you.
Hi, Jermaine.
Congratulations, ladies, for bringing this forward. I'm so excited. I can't wait to read it. My biggest impression, I haven't read it, of course, but my biggest impression is that this is an effort of you, Paula, a person, bringing their internal practices to the forefront of their life. And you are integrating what you know internally from your years of practice into your pedestrian everyday life, which is the goal. I mean, that to me is the goal of having a practice. It's not to be kept in a studio, it's meant to go out. And here you are. And I can't wait to read your experience of that. I'm so excited for you.
Thank you,
Thank
Jane. Absolutely. I think that is the intention of practice, that it come with us into the world. Yeah.
Mhm.
And the world needs it. It needs all kinds of practices,
Yeah.
intentional practices. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Jermaine.
Yeah.
And then we have a question from Bertie Klein, who asked how we can get a signed book. If you are in the Rhode Island area, we actually have scheduled Paula for a public facing book event at Riff Raff Books on February 23rd at 6 p.m. So if anyone is in the area, we would definitely invite you to stop in for that. And Paula will be selling books in physical copy, and I'm sure there will be some signing involved as well. Other than that, if you would like a signed book, if you wanted to reach out to the publishing house itself, I can drop the email that you can reach me at, and I would be able to facilitate something like that between you and Paula.
Mm.
We have another question from Joanne Hart, who asked, now that the book is finished, what further ideas and experiences has this work brought to you? What would you add if there were a postscript?
Wow, great question. Yeah, I think what I'm most excited about right now are actually these conversations, are and hearing other people's stories. I feel like this is just a whole just ripe for engaging in the questions about relationship with our loved ones after they die. What I think there's all kinds of ways that we have little subtle experiences or intimations, and yeah, so I'm just curious. Already I've had numerous people tell me stories about watches, and so this too is interesting to me, like how objects, photos, these artifacts of relationship carry something, and or that can be that yeah, that actually are inviting us to they're perfect mirrors to go into sort of an inner experience around relationship with someone who we were close to. So I actually have thought about doing some offerings in relationship to this and inviting people to bring an object or a photo. And so we'll see if something like that happens. But thanks for the question, Joanne.
Yes, thank you. I think we have time for just one more question. And this one is coming from Jay and Kathleen. And Kathleen asked, I'd love to hear you speak about the journey and the process of working with Kate, an editor, and translating this intimate storytelling into a book to be shared out in the world. So this could go both to Kate and Paula.
Yeah, well, you got to gush about me, Kate, and I didn't get to gush about you. So that's not really fair, but it really was quite an extraordinary experience to work with Kate, who comes from a deep, rich contemplative practices of her own. And yeah, I know I've felt so held in the process, and we've spoken about this, the degree of a kind of mutuality, and you already heard some of what she said. I mean, Kate was someone who actually wanted to try the discipline. She wanted to know for herself, what is this work that you do, and how might it impact me, her, and our work together. So I just can't say enough about your your embrace, your commitment, and yeah, and there's something, so I guess what I want to say also is that this was exactly the kind of relationship that I think the watch is speaking for and or wanting to lift up, a relationship of reciprocity and a shared holding so that something, not just something could emerge, but you said it before, Kate, this book wanted to be written. It's hard for me to kind of say that fully, but I do feel it's almost like it has a kind of little, it has its own agenda, but that what wants to come forth can in this kind of the quality of this holding of a space. And this I know from the work with Janet, who was so brilliant at creating and holding a space for emergence. And yeah, so I guess that's what I would say. And with so much gratitude, Kate.
Paula, the gratitude is mine. I've often described developmental editing as midwifery, and indeed it is a birthing. But what you shared just in these closing weeks as we're getting the book all ready to go is that this message came from life to a manuscript to a book back to life. So there's this cycle that producing a book has to go through a life cycle, and from your life story into manuscript form, together into book form, and then into the lives of all who read it is what I've been witnessing.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. I think that's all the time we have for questions today. And so I'd like to invite us into closing. Thank you again so much for coming out and spending an hour with us this afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you're coming from. I'd like for Paula to give us some final words just before we close out, and then I will tell you all how you can find the book and provide some information about that event at Providence.
Thank you, Ava. Yeah, so I guess what I would say, there's no denying that this is a perilous time for humanity and our planet, and yet with all the darkness, there is so much light. And I feel it's a time for leaning into the qualities and experiences where we feel most human. And it's within relationship that we know our interconnectedness and where, just as I was saying in relation to my work with Kate, where we can create and cultivate spaces for care and hope and creativity and solidarity. And what if this interconnectedness extends to relationships with those who have died and those who are not born yet? How would this possibility impact our choices and our actions, our way of being in the world? So it's a question that I will continue to carry. And thank you so much, everybody who came today. You are really helping to sort of like literally help this book come out into the world. And I really appreciate it, all the support.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paula. And thank you so much, Kate, and thank you so much, Bonnie, for being a part of this conversation today. We couldn't have done it without you. And thank you so much to Stephanie Turner also for assisting us with a lot of the behind the scenes and technicalities of using Zoom. So I'm going to share just the events page for Riff Raff Books in Providence, Rhode Island. If you're interested in coming out, if you scroll down to February 23rd, there's some more information about what that event will be like. And again, you can pre-order a copy of The Watch through wildhousepublishing.com. And thank you again so much. This was such a lovely discussion.
Mm.
Thanks, Ava.
I'm going to gallery so I can just see all your beautiful faces.